Good.
Okay, so hello everyone. As you will see, we'll slowly start the discussion with Professor John Keane. But first of all, I have a quick note. We did want to start the session today by speaking to students who were occupying the lecture hall in Freie Universität Berlin. However, although they managed to stay there for several hours, unfortunately, the university called the police on them and they were aggressively removed from campus. And however, the good news is that because they are very persistent, they are now finding themselves a new spot to talk to us again. So we will hopefully have a short intervention by them at some point later after Professor John have spoken. So for now, as you can see, we started the recording. This session will start with a quick introduction about our group, who we are, and then we will move to Professor, introduce him for those who do not know him. And after that, Professor Joan will offer us a short lecture on the future of universities. After that, there will be time for questions and answers section. So we welcome your questions to be typed down in the comment section. With this, let me start to introduce our group. So basically, we are, I'm first very honored to introduce you to our students collective today. Our collective is an academic initiative committed to breaking the silence on the dissent and on defending academic freedom. Our group was formed as we're all deeply concerned about how things are escalating in Gaza right now, and we are witnessing several violations of human rights and war crimes being ignored in Germany. We students from diverse disciplines, we have two main goals. The first, we want to establish a space in which we can support intellectual and student activism that is addressing the unjust reality Palestinians are facing. This support will take place in the forms of meetings, rallies, teach-ins, lecture series, film screenings, and demonstrations. Also, and as we do not want to reinforce a divide between the global South and North, the underlying approach of our activities involves critiquing Eurocentric knowledge production and exploring alternative perspectives from the global South. Second, we're determined to challenge the growing restrictions on academic freedom within our institutions. Our university's public alignment with the State of Israel during ongoing violations of international law and human rights have sparked our mobilization. Universities are supposed to be places of vigorous intellectual engagement with global political affairs, a place for academic freedom and space for activism for social justice. However, we're now witnessing currently is what we are now witnessing currently is students and professors at universities around the world are having events cancelled, are being retaliated against for organizing and speaking out, are being harassed, having job offers rescinded, getting fired, suspended, shut down, for wasting their or raising their voices, or as we've seen today, they were kicked out by the police. And yesterday they were attacked by university staff. And now I want to move to introduce Professor John Keane. Most of you might have already known him, but many of you might have first heard his name when he recently posted his resignation letter from the Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin, the WZB, University in Berlin, in relation to what is happening currently in Palestine. Professor Joan is renowned globally for his creative thinking about democracy. He was born in Southern Australia. John Keane is a professor of politics at the University of Sydney, and until recently, he was also a professor at the WZB. He's got lots of activism and lots of work done. I will just gonna go through just examples. I'm not gonna even call it main phases because it was really rich. But for example, in the 1980s, he contributed extensively to the program of flying university apartment seminar in Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. His political and scholarly writing during that period was published under the pen name Erika Blair. In the spring of 1989, just before the revolutions that shook Central Eastern Europe, he founded the world's first democracy research institute, the London-based Centre of Study of Democracy, CSD. And during the past decade, he founded and directed the Sydney Democracy, the SDN also, and he contributed to the New York Times, Al Jazeera, the Times Literary Supplement, The Guardian, Harper's, the South China Morning Post, and the Huffington Post. The Times of London described him as one of the world's leading political thinkers. Sorry.
Worst, yes.
Let's remember that English is not my first language. So the Times of London described him as one of the world's leading political thinkers and writers. El País Madrid has ranked him as among the world's leading analysts of political systems in 2018. The Australian Broadcasting Commission called him one of the greatest intellectual exports from Australia. His work has been translated to approximately 35 languages. So, in short, Professor Keane's life is extremely rich with content and expertise, and it's really hard to summarize it. But I do encourage you all to check his website, johnkeane.net. And now let's delve into the complexities of roles and duties of universities and the importance of historical context of their establishment, especially when it comes to tackling basic questions about university scholarly duties. This is relevant particularly today to reality surrounding the situation in Gaza and how it is framed in German academia and the consequences of that on students and academics. You suggested, Professor Keane, you suggested that universities still promise something no other institutions can provide: free spaces for challenging reigning orthodoxies, nurturing a sense of worldly wonder, and promoting public commitments to the improvement of life on our planet. And now we move to you. Do you still think so after what we told you has happened?
Well, herzlichen Dank, shukran, Hunada. I'm very grateful for your invitation, delighted to be with you and other students and colleagues who are taking advantage of the digital communications revolution by being everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I wanted to say also schönen guten Abend and salam alaikum to you all. It so happens that it's morning here in Sydney. It also so happens that my daughter, who is celebrating her 5 weeks old birthday this morning, kept me up most of the night, and I would like to dedicate my remarks to her. She's currently asleep and well fed. As you have already heard from Hunada, there are background developments to this webinar. The banning of the BDS in Germany, the most recent cancellation of the Hannah Arendt lecture by Masha Gerson, the police actions that Hunada has spoken about, my own resignation from the WCB, a painful decision taken during the last 10 days. The growing warnings inside Germany and outside Germany that the official attachment of the German state, Staatsräson, to Israel is actually producing damaging effects, which I hope we will discuss. Damaging effects on citizenship within Germany, but also the reputation of Germany globally. This is a warning that recently Dr. Michel Ludens, who is a German scholar of considerable expertise in the Arab world, he has issued this warning. I hope we will discuss these and other matters. But my immediate topic, prompted by these developments, is to do with universities, past, present, and future. What is a university? What are its essential qualities, or what should its highest ideals be? When confronted by evils, how do staff, researchers, students, executives of universities react? How should they react? Can there be fresh formulations of principles in these years of the 21st century concerning the highest ideals of universities? Do universities have a future? These are questions that have been bubbling for some time. Here I would give as an example the uproar that was caused when the French philosopher Jean-François Lyotard was asked by the Quebec government in Canada to issue a report about the future of universities a half a generation ago. Lyotard delivered a text which came to be known as La Condition Postmoderne, in which he suggested that universities, for all kinds of historical reasons, could no longer be committed to the attachment to truth, Wahrheit, with a capital T, but that actually universities are special spaces in which the recognition of differences, of attitude, of pictures of the world should be respected. That the university should stand for pluralism. It should stand for opposition to, as he put it, grand narratives. Whatever one thinks about that classic report by Jean-François Lyotard, one thing is clear, that the uproar that that text created is a reminder that actually the notion of a university is not fixed in stone. There is no timeless first principles of the university. Instead, we should pay attention to the changing historical forms of the university. And why should we do this? Because there is an old rule, which I like to use in my writings, that those who are ignorant of the past invariably misunderstand the present. So what I would like to do for maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes is sketch very, very crudely a short history of universities, beginning with the origins of universities in the East. It's a striking feature of their history. We could call the first type of university a spiritual or ethical university. In every case, the earliest universities were attached to transcendent principles, to a belief in deities or a belief in a monotheistic God. The historians teach us that the first such academies of learning, where scholars and students gathered, were born of China during the 5th century BCE, when the followers of Confucius gathered in various places in what is today China to discuss the highest principles, the ethical spirit and rules that should be followed in life. This produced in China numerous Confucius academies. It began to set the template for what later came to be called the scholar official, that is, the scholar who is close to governmental power, the scholar who warns against abuses of power, the scholar who is concerned with central ethical principles. That model of the university in the case of China was established around 1,000 years ago firmly, and it remains until today something of the template of universities in China, of course under one-party rule, not under Confucian-wise leadership. The early world of Islam also embraced much the same notion a little later of the spiritual ethical university. If you visit the city of Fez in Morocco, you will find evidence of the world's oldest university that still is functioning, established in 859 CE in that city. It was established with the help of a wealthy merchant's daughter named Fatima al-Fihri, and it was not called a universitas. It was instead an institution with a mosque in which there were several schools, madrasas, attached to that mosque. It was an institution that attracted talent, wisdom, wonder from scholars from afar, even from outside the Muslim world. Figures such as the Jewish philosopher Maimonides and grammarians and geographers who, including Muhammad al-Idrisi, who studied at this institution. The university, the historians tell us, in Fez, attracted considerable public respect in that city and beyond. It was committed to what was called science. It was a word with multiple meanings, including knowledge, logic, learning, scholarship, recognition and understanding and grasping the world. The mode of teaching was gatherings of pupils in circles named halakat, and it was in these circles that students were encouraged to reflect upon the highest ethical principles given by God. It's interesting that this first model of the university was transported into the European world. If you visit Bologna, its university was the first in Europe, established in 1088 CE, and later, a few years later, 8 years later, in Oxford in 1096 CE. If you look at the motto of these universities, you will see that these universities, imported from the Muslim world, were in fact committed to the same notion of ethical spirituality. The University of Bologna operates under the banner of St. Peter is everywhere, the father of the law. Bologna is its mother. Or if you go to Oxford, the motto is Dominus illuminatio mea, the Lord is my light. So here, in brief, is the first phase of universities, spaces institutionally separated from the world, spaces in which scholars and students gather to reflect on the world and to reflect on the highest ethical principles. Put simply, there was a second phase centered on Berlin, in fact, that happened in the history of universities towards the end of the 18th century and the early years of the 19th century. It is what we could call the ivory tower model of the university. And central to the formation of this new notion of the university was the geographer, scholar, Wilhelm von Humboldt, whose friends and supporters established what is, I think, considered to be the first modern ivory tower university. nowadays known as the Humboldt University. It was originally called the Friedrich Wilhelms Universität zu Berlin, as you probably know. This was an institution committed to Wissenschaft, to science. It was science with a difference. It meant the search for truth with a capital T, based on the unrestricted use of free reasoning. There are writings by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida, who points out that the Kantian and the Humboldtian principle of nothing is without reason was in a way the guiding spirit of this ivory tower model of the university. The commitment to truth, the commitment to reason was the mantra that held this model of the university together. Notice that although this ivory tower university was to be funded by philanthropists and also the state, the principle of the university is detachment from the state. So the university, the ivory tower university, is protected, legally protected, funded by the state, but it has an institutional autonomy, or should enjoy an institutional autonomy. The university is operating according to this model, or should operate at arm's distance from the church. So this is the beginning of the secularized Entzauberung der Welt process that Max Weber described. The university, the Ivory Tower University, is committed to philosophy. Above all, the quest for truthful and universally applicable knowledge. It is a place where scholars judge other scholars, according to Immanuel Kant. If you read Hegel's famous lectures on the philosophy of world history, which were delivered at the Humboldt in the years 1822, 1828, and 1830, you will find this spirit of the Ivory Tower University at work. Humboldt himself said that the purpose of the university was die objektive Wissenschaft mit der subjektiven Bildung. So the idea is commitment to objective knowledge and the development of educated subjectivity. Of course, we are living in times in which this Ivory Tower University model and the spiritual ethical university model no longer seemingly apply. We can have a discussion, I hope we will, about the elements, the traces that continue to operate within universities in our years of the 21st century. But I would like to say to you that we are now in a third historical phase. I am struggling to find a term to describe the university. It could be called the multiplex university. A multiplex institution is one which is multifunctional. It's pushed in one way, pulled in another way by various forces. The university in our times has a certain incoherent quality. It is multiple things to multiple power groups, including students and scholars. What I want to say is that the university in our times, to begin with, is it is a system of higher education that's committed to economic growth and to investment and to considerations of corporate profit. You can see this in the way, this commercialization of universities that has happened in my lifetime. You can see this in the way that university communications teams engage in marketing exercises. They do branding of universities. They like league tables. They like to say that their university is ranked as the University of Sydney is in the top 20 universities in the world. And they use data accordingly to confirm this marketing exercise. The university attracts big funders who have played, for example, a role recently in the American universities' controversies about Gaza, Israel, and the fate of Palestinians. If you look at developments at Harvard, you will see that big philanthropists offering millions, corporate philanthropists, play a very important role in shaping the university. And yet the university is also an appendage of government. So if you look at most universities in the West, in the Atlantic region, for example, but through Latin America and in parts of Asia and the Pacific, you will see that universities are subject to constant government audits, government funding regulations. Universities are expected to abide by laws that governments pass. They are required to implement government instructions about secrecy and surveillance, for instance. But the university is also under pressure from both corporate capitalist forces on the one hand and state power on the other. It's also an institution that I think in most cases is subject to attempts to impose a kind of bureaucratic managerialism. That is, where executives from president and vice chancellor downwards seek to build up a bureaucracy that then handles the corporate pressures and pressures from the state by instituting forms of rule that I would say, on balance, in my experience, are having decadent effects on the spirit of universities. Endless reform and change programs, official announcements of commitment to academic excellence programs, the insistence on following the rules set by managers. All of these conditions are clear, and they are clearly having effects right down to the very bottom of universities. So, for example, I speak about the process of casualization of the workforce, the creation of a whole stratum of especially younger teachers who are not paid very well, who are expected to be workhorses. Or I'm speaking about the setting aside of the professoriate. There are signs that the professoriate no longer really matter to bureaucratic managers. I'm speaking about the way that it is expected that staff and students conform to the rules that are applied from on high. These are some of the decadent effects of this bureaucratic managerialism. So universities are stretched. They tend to become businesses. They tend to become agents of state rule. They tend to become sites of experimentation with bureaucratic management. But they are also institutions, Hunada mentioned this in her introduction, that are carriers of ideals that are very high ideals. I've mentioned these already in relation to Jean-François Lyotard. The commitment to cultivating, separate from government and business, cultivating a sense of worldly wonder. Wonder is a very important quality. This interest in the world of students and staff. The commitment to truth-seeking, usually with a small t, truth-seeking. That is to say, universities stand for no nonsense. They are opposed to lies. They are opposed to bullshit. They are opposed to the hot air that is produced, so to say, by media journalism. They are supposed to be institutions where there is the cultivation of pluralism, the expectation that in courses, in reading, in experience in libraries, in going online, students and scholars become committed to a kind of adventure of thinking, a commitment to recognizing that the world is a very complicated place, that that hubris is not cool, that double standards, hypocrisy are not acceptable, that the university is a space of honesty, of humility, of openness to the world. Well, this, friends, in a very short time is a very, very brief history of universities. It is, I hope, helpful for setting the background framework for discussing how universities can be made to live up to these ideals of publicity, of openness, of pluralism, of truth-seeking, of opposition to nonsense and lies. I haven't time to discuss, I will stop now, the history of the more recent history of attempts to defend these principles. Let me mention just one example, which I'm so old that I remember very well. And it is the invention of the teach-in. You may not know, but the teach-in was an invention centered on the University of Chicago in the middle 1960s. Central to this invention was the great anthropologist Marshall Sahlins. So the situation in a period of great uproar with enormous opposition to a war in Vietnam, a war for which I was conscripted but refused to go. This war produced uprisings on campus. Campus authorities, university authorities responded with police and crackdowns. And so students, Marshall Sahlins describes, came up with the idea that they should boycott lectures, but they should not leave the university, that they should use the university as a geographic space in which to gather to discuss the big matters of our day. Honestly, without nonsense, without arrogance, with deep humility. That is the invention that I can remember in my earliest years of the university. It was quite a phenomenon, the teaching. The question is whether in our times there are equivalent innovations that can be used to defend the university under pressure from state, corporate, and bureaucratic management. So, shukran.
Thank you so much. I think you leave us with so many questions. Already have a couple questions from Dustin, which I will start with. But my comment is, it feels like we are, you called it teach-ins.
Mm.
So it seems like what we're doing here, right? Because we're not feeling satisfied with what we're being taught at universities. We are allowed to express our opinions in certain frames, but not all frames. And we need to be extremely restrictive. So this sounds like how we felt we need actually spaces that we literally, I think many of us stopped attending lectures because of this. I will read now the question to you, and waiting for more questions. You could write your questions in the Q&A section. And after that, I also have one question that I do want to ask, or actually more than one, but I will share the time with the questions coming from the audience. So Dustin is asking, how complicit are the media and the university administration in allowing the public discourse to be against the students. Right now, exmatriculation. Okay, someone needs to. Exmatriculation is trending on Twitter, demanding the expulsion of students who participated at FO today at the sit-in. The FO proudly publishes articles recalling student actions such as sit-ins and open lectures during the anti-Vietnam War movement in the 1960s. What were the authorities' reaction back then? What are the differences with now? And has the state's apparatuses for pacification gotten stronger? This is actually all questions from Dustin. I'm happy to reread any part of it if needed.
No, I mean, thank you very much, Dustin, wherever you are, it's a brilliant question. In that period of the 1960s and early 1970s, police regularly came to campus. They were called by university powers that be. There were arrests. There was, of course, the shootings that shocked scholars, students, and publics at Kent State University when the National Guard appeared and mowed down a number of students who were protesting against the war in Vietnam. Since that time, policing methods have become more intensive. Police forces are more heavily armed. There is a militarization of policing that's going on in all actually existing democracies. We should be very worried about that. But remember the importance, I want to say, of means of communication, that is, the media through which these occupations and sit-ins and protests on and around campus operate. The sit-in was born of the age of television. Marshall McLuhan, the great Canadian scholar, famously described the Vietnam War as the first television war. People sitting in their living rooms watching not only the war, but also campus disturbances. The inventors of the teach-in were very clever in that they used local radio as an alternative means of communication for reinforcing the protests. And through time, that resistance succeeded. It led, as you know, to the withdrawal, defeated of American troops from Vietnam and the end of compulsory conscription. So the question in our times is, which are different because we are living in the era of digital network communications. The question is, how can communications media be used to defend these highest principles of the university? You are much cleverer, all of you, than I am on this, but I would say that in just one or two sentences, that digital mutinies, this is a phrase I like to use, become possible. No matter how extreme police repression is, no matter how nasty managers of universities are, no matter how double standard, how much they are driven by double standards, it becomes possible using clicks to produce information, to circulate information on a web-based form. And it is possible to resist the decadent trends that I have been describing. These I call digital mutinies. And they seem to me, this event is an example. And it seems to me that what we are witnessing on X and other media, Instagram and so on, are instances of this resistance that the powerful find very difficult to control.
I really like that. So, but especially the last point about the powerful finding it harder to fight us through these new platforms of are harder for them to tell us what to do on. It's just so many channels to go through. But back to Dustin's, we have also two more new questions. Back to the point about the complicity of especially the media and the university, and I want to connect it to what you mentioned about incoherent qualities, and then take that a little bit farther. So the complicity of the university, the media is like I'm going to put aside. So the complicity of the university. You mentioned incoherent qualities, and I want to say, are the universities not worried about losing their value because of these incoherences and these complicities that they're trying to do? Is that not something that crosses their mind? You know, like you've been in contact. You had especially in your last exchange with the university. We saw in your resignation message some exchanges we only guess about. We never. We were always wondering if such a dialogue happens. Do they feel guilty? Do they feel ashamed, at least?
This is not entirely clear, and of course it's context dependent. There are some universities where very clearly the management does not care. €1. I would say that one of the decadent trends, I haven't so far mentioned it, is silence of those who manage universities. It's a joke, but a serious joke that that prompts me to coin a new term in English. I guess it could be also translated into German, possibly into Arabic. Hypocrisy, not to be mistaken for hypocrisy. So Hippocrates was the ancient Egyptian and ancient Greek goddess of silence. So hypocrisy is the art of ruling universities by silence. They say nothing. And what I tried to do with my open letter to the Vice Chancellor of the University of Sydney, which you can read online, was to break that silence. And it helped generate a discussion inside the university about the double standards of the university. The university Vice Chancellor sent a message to all staff and students saying, you know, we respect openness and learning and commitment to truth and justice, but we will not tolerate terrorism of the Hamas kind. And so I wrote to him an open letter saying that, you know, why do you not speak about forms of violence that have all of the hallmarks of genocide? You know, the destruction of a whole people who are being pushed further south onto a postage stamp and who are expected to live somehow and survive in poverty and with broken hearts and with great violence. Why do you not speak about this? Well, the Vice Chancellor did not reply. This is not surprising. As the Präsidentin of the Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin does not reply, it's not cool to reply. They prefer hypocrisy. Well, there is no immediate cure for hypocrisy except breaking silence. And here it's an old Greek a democratic principle. The Greek democrats of the ancient democracies of Greece had this word parrhesia. This is the courage to break silence, to say things that are not the orthodoxy, to put power on the spot, to ask them to explain why it is that they don't speak about their double standards. This, I think, is a very major problem in the so-called governance of universities. There are, of course, warm-hearted and good-spirited presidents and vice chancellors who are very honest and who can actually be made to be more so. I'm happy to report at the University of Sydney that the vice chancellor and the management now speak very evenly about the right of assembly, the right of open expression, so long as there is no violence. This is an institution that is committed, that is against discrimination against Jewish students. It is an institution that is not committed per se to the state of Israel and to the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, but it's also an institution that will not tolerate, will not accept discrimination, bigotry, violence against our Muslim students, and we have a very large number. So, university leaders can be nudged to accept these principles of decency, of openness, of the highest ideals of the 21st century university. Perhaps I'm too optimistic, but there is no alternative but to defend these principles and to be patient. These things take time. The weakening of the powerful by the powerless takes time. We will know in 5 years from now or 10 years from now whether acts of resistance, commitment to these highest ideals have succeeded or not.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this answer. And joining me with thanking you is Justin, the person who asked the question, said, Harpocrat, silence is violence. Brilliant. Thank you for your answering questions. And thanks to me for moderating. I'm going to go to the following question with this vibe of optimism that you have, and we hope to have, inshallah. With a question from Karim. Karim is asking, taking us back to the second period. He says, how was the relationship between universities, state and market during the second period, Humboldt's times, when universities were called ivory towers? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long and complicated history, Karim, and thank you very much too for an excellent question. Principally, during the course of the 19th and early 20th century, universities are state-founded and state-funded institutions with bourgeois philanthropy, contributing to the purchase of land, the erection of buildings, and this, during the course of the 19th century, is a model. The ivory tower model of the university is, of course, an elite institution. Women are typically excluded. The colonized rarely have access to universities, except in some good colonies, such as my own in South Australia. It was a model English colony that was co-founded by figures like John Stuart Mill and James Mill and Jeremy Bentham. Many of the streets of my native city are named after them. They gave money to the university, but these were elite institutions. We are living in times where universities are committed in principle to the democratization of access. That's a very different dynamic. I would say one last thing about this ivory tower model. I mentioned it in my letter of resignation to Jutta Allmendinger, Präsidentin Allmendinger. I quoted Max Weber to her. Around 1900, one of the central questions of universities is whether the emergent trade union, cooperative society, social democratic party, and Marxist parties are entitled to representation in universities. And what is very interesting, if you look at the writings of Max Weber, when he is in Berlin in this period, in the early years of the 20th century, is his, I would say, radical defense of the principle that no university should defer to state power, and certainly not to the church, and certainly not to big business. That the university is a space of learning. It is a space of Sachlichkeit, of objectivity, by which Max Weber meant the realization that universities cannot come up with some ultimate truth, but universities are spaces in which plural norms, plural ethics are discussed, analyzed, debated, torn apart, shown to be unworkable ethical principles. And if you look at these writings, more than a few of which were published in German newspapers in this period, you will find that Max Weber is a militant defender of the principle that the university should be an open space, and that it should not censor, not even socialist professors. And as he put it, and as I quoted to Jutta Almendinger, universities that defer to governments actually commit suicide. They actually cut their own throats. These are the words of Max Weber, and they seem to me to be timeless words that continue to be highly relevant in these years of the 21st century. But thank you very much, Kari.
Well, now I think it's a good shift, because Dariusz, I hope I read the name correctly, have question about also the role of university in relation to Gaza. So Dariusz says, hello, Joan, Dariusz here. So simple question, how do you see the prospect of the Gaza situation? Do universities play a role in the face of the massive pressure from the corporate bureaucracy and government intimidation in challenging the misinformation going on? How many people do you think would have the courage to defy the states as we see it today? I shared the question with Dariusz also. That's because, and this is why I was not optimistic when you were. So do university play a role?
Well, thank you very much, Dariusz, and also Hunada for the double-barreled question. I think that it is clear that all universities, including in Indonesia, including in India, including in Japan, and there is some signs of restlessness in Chinese universities, all of them are for local and global reasons, are concerned about what is going on in the West Bank and Gaza. And exactly because, according to that brief history that I sketched, exactly because universities are in principle still committed to the principle of open space, in which there is disputation of big worldly matters, universities are very central to how this conflict is mediated, how cold conflict is mediated, how this war on Palestinians is prosecuted, how it is mediated, how it is covered by all kinds of media. This is unfinished business. We are in the earliest stages of this conflict. What worries me, if I may say, Dariusz and also Hunada, what worries me is the specifics of the German dynamic. I mean, it is a very unusual situation in which, following the lead of Angela Merkel in her lecture in Israel, where she forcefully, as you know, linked the state of Israel to German Staatsräson. I mean, this is not the case in the United States. The governmental thinking is very different. And what I understand from my experience at the Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin is that this peculiar German dynamic about attachment to the state of Israel is what is in question. It's certainly in question elsewhere in the world, and I may be wrong about this, but I would say that the Netanyahu government's propaganda machine is not working very well. There is, I mean, overnight you will read in the New York Times that the staffers of Joe Biden, of President Biden, are on strike protesting against the president. I mean, this is a symptom of things not going very well for the Netanyahu government. And I won't go on at length, but I wanted just to put some remarks, as it were, on the table about this Israel as German Staatsräson notion, or as my former colleague in Sydney, Dirk Moses, calls it, a catechism. You know, this rule book that says in German institutions, whether it's in Axel Springer Verlag, or it's the Bundestag, or it's in German bureaucracies, or in business, or in universities, this mantra that we must be committed to the state of Israel. So what I think the protests and critiques of this position are revealing are the following kinds of perverse dynamics. If Israel is, so to say, buried in the very notion of the German state, then it's very likely that whatever an Israeli government does, including doing evil things, potentially genocidal things, is something that has to be accepted. But this is a contradiction of everything that German democracy in Europe stands for. There are other perverse effects. It seems to me, as an outsider, that this catechism, Dirk Moses, honoring the state of Israel, actually has discriminatory effects on Jews, of actual living Jews in Germany and elsewhere. I have many Jewish friends who are appalled by the German government commitment to Israel. They are appalled because it doesn't describe their own attitudes. They feel deeply anguished, deeply upset that actually this very policy, the decadent effect, is producing anti-Semitism. I mean, this is an ugly truth for me, that you can see the signs of the growth of anti-Semitism because of the double standard commitment to a state that itself is waging a brutal war and a destructive war on millions of people. I could go on about this. I do think one last remark. I do think, as an outsider, it's a very controversial remark, but the German official sense of the nation, of being German, has been purified by its attachment to Israel. I mean, this is the whole problem that I raised with Jutta Almendinger about guilt. I quoted Karl Jaspers, please read the letter, in which there is a kind of purification rite that has gone on in Germany. It came from below initially, in which guilt and shame for what happened in the Nazi Zeit began to morph slowly through time into a sense that we Germans have purified ourselves and we are attached and our self-definition is confirmed by our unconditional support for Israel. The trouble with that dynamic is that it's a dynamic in which the seeds of nation-centered nationalist thinking happens. The RFD is in a way a product of this dynamic, and it's a very disturbing dynamic. And I'm sorry, just one last thing. What also bothers me about this Israel as Germany's Staatsräson is the forgetfulness about the involvement of the German Empire in the 20th century's first act of genocide of the Nama and Herero peoples in Southwest Africa, what is today Namibia. This is not widely discussed in the German media. The problem of genocide is not equivalent to what happened during World War II. There were earlier instances of it. There is dishonesty about this. It's not to say that that Germans are bad people, or that somehow, forgetfulness is a German quality. Not at all. I was born in a country that was itself a product of empire, where the extermination of indigenous peoples nearly happened. I don't feel good about that. I feel that I do, as a citizen of the country in which I live, have a responsibility for coming to terms with that. What is odd for me is that the official claim that any protests against Netanyahu's government are anti-Semitic is forgetful of this much older history of genocide. Well, there are a few remarks about what the defense of universities is up against. That is the orthodoxies that I think deserve to be challenged.
Thank you for the answer. I agree to a certain degree with your answer, but I also want to challenge one point about the German guilt. But before that, I want to read from the comments. I missed Karim's reply or comment. Eventually was that quote. That's very enlightening answer for me as a graduate of UCL, University College London. Thanks so much. And then I will go to for my question, but also a question from Laura, who says, do you think bureaucracy has gained this much power within universities, and how can it be handled? So why do you think bureaucracy has gained this much power within universities, and how can it be handled to allow for more pluralism in teaching again, in Germany, for example? And as not relevant to this question, when you mentioned the German guilt, there's a kind of assumption that the Holocaust happened, the German guilt happened, and it was consistent. I'm reading Norman Finkelstein's The Holocaust Industry, and from the very beginning, there's an interesting note that up till a certain extent, the Holocaust, as we know it today, was not a time period where it was not what it is being presented as such today. I know it's mostly related to the US. I have not I'm still at the beginning of the book, but the idea itself was a little bit intriguing. If that's true, has Germany always been this guilty and responsible about its guilt from the very beginning, or is this today, or is it actually Holocaust industry? I know this is an absolutely different question, and I know that I've asked two really complicated questions, but we also need to bear in mind we're trying to wrap up within 20 minutes, and I still have got a few questions. So with that in mind, Professor, the floor is yours.
Well, we to state the obvious, as students, as teachers in universities, we should continue to remember and to be appalled by the genocidal violence against Jewish peoples that happened in that fateful period of the late 30s and till the middle 1940s. The problem of remembering this is of course it would be a very long discussion. Vergangenheitsbewältigung is the German word to describe this very painful long-term process of coming to terms with that violence. And I think that here there are obviously some tricky questions, but I would like to make a couple of observations. I would say from all of the years that I spent in Germany, I learned that the process of revisiting the past in order to come to terms with it was initially done from below. It was a Zivilgesellschaft phenomenon. It was a civil society phenomenon. You know, the demand for Stolpersteine, you know, that there should be markers in the street to remember a particular Jewish citizen of Germany whose life ended in Dachau or somewhere. And what is for me striking about the German dynamic is it happens elsewhere, is the way that the state has kind of acquired that language that originally came from below. And so we have a state-backed memory, remembering of the Shoah, that is, so to say, monopolized by the big institutions, and particularly of government. It's as if civil society has been, that theme of remembering has been taken away. I think that civil society phenomenon of Vergangenheitsbewältigung was very a striking theme, for example, of New German cinema, which I watched, you know, as a young man with great interest. Rainer Werner Fassbinder, you know, dares to interview his mother over many bottles of beer in one of the films, Deutschland im Herbst, in which his mother says, you know, I think what we need in Germany is a good Hitler. This is one dynamic, the shift from a civil society discourse to a state discourse. I do think that part of the second point, and I'll stop, is that part of this remembering, this selective remembering of the Shoah, is that it should not become too simplified. I mentioned already what happened in Namibia and the failure until this point of German governments to compensate, to make reparations for this genocidal violence, to be very honest about the practices that were invented there in Southwest Africa and then later imposed, for example, by the Nazis on Poles. You may not know, but in Namibia, there was, it was a laboratory where all local Black people, whenever they came across a German official, were required to say in auf Deutsch, schönen guten Morgen, or guten Morgen, and if not, they would be arrested. That principle was applied to the Poles in Warsaw by the Nazis. So the selective remembering of Shoah, I mean, needs widening. It needs to be more complicated. And I end with one example that may not be known to you. In Berlin, you have this remarkable large space of stones to remember the murdered Jews of Europe. You may not know, but the historians who gathered, the commission that gathered, had to decide, I know one of them, and have talked with that person. They had to decide what this memorial should be. There was an opinion I am reliably told, of at least one commissioner who thought that this should be a memorial to the murdered Jews of Germany. There was the position at the other end of the spectrum that the Shoah, that what the Nazis did in Europe was not just the destruction of Jews, the attempted genocide of Jews, the genocide of the elimination of political prisoners, of the disabled, of homosexuals, of Romani, of Dutch, of Danes, and as Hannah Arendt, the great German Jewish scholar who emigrated, reminded us. I mean, the Nazis had an unlimited list of people to be exterminated.
Yeah.
But the Holocaust industry, as you said, has simplified all of this so that it is entirely about the state of Israel. And that seems to me to needs to be broken. Not because I am an anti-Semite, not at all. If I'm accused of that, which I was by the Präsidentin of the Wissenschaftszentrum, I'm very upset by that remark. It's not true. But what is needed in this period is much greater honesty in the German scene, but beyond, about the complexities of genocide in the 20th century and into the 21st century.
I thank you so much.
I'm sorry for this long-winded.
No, thank you. But you still got to maybe briefly. There's still now 3 questions this way, because Laura's questions kind of answered. But if you really could briefly, because now we have 30 minutes left. The question about the bureaucracy, how it became strong in the universities, and how could it be handled to allow more pluralism? Yeah. I'm so sorry about the time thing, but there's also still more questions. So.
Okay, I will say 3 sentences maybe. I mean, this process of bureaucratic managerialism is, functionally speaking, it has a lot to do with the corporatization and state control of universities. I mean, this is a protective mechanism where a power group inside the universities decides to protect the institution by managing it in a certain way, top-down bureaucratic managerialism. I think this is the principal explanation. How to break it? Well, this is partly what we are doing here. Join your union. We had a 2-year strike at the University of Sydney, and we managed to win quite a few things. It was a bitter strike. Have teach-ins, do your digital mutinies, demand in jokes, in proverbs, in whichever way you can, demand honesty, demand an end to double standards. Do not flatter hypocrites. Demand humility. I mean, these are very elementary things for defending universities under the pressure of bureaucratic managerialism.
But still,
call for their resignation, and you can see this on my X account. Punk them. One of the most delightful moments in recent weeks is the punking of the vice chancellor of the University of Melbourne by a Palestinian woman student. He doesn't expect her to come. It's filmed. She asks him some questions, which of course he doesn't answer.
I've seen
this is how you do it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting video, and the official looks really angry. So thanks for the tips. I guess we're on the right track. A question from our group who are sitting in a cafe, who were kicked out from the university. They demand. Yeah. So greeting to you all. Maybe you tell them something when you reply to this. So the question is, so I have two more people only. This one and a question from Jay. So from Alex and the group, it's what do you think would be the consequences of the institutions, universities, media, and government now that a lot of people with migrant background feel betrayed and lost all the trust in them because of their complicity? Not only Germany, but the West in itself. So what do you think the consequences for the institutions, universities, and media and government?
I have great feeling for the question, Alex, and this is a global problem where new immigrants are disinvited. They don't feel that they are welcome in universities. They are subjected to silence and bigoted remarks, and of course contexts where there are police crackdowns, that they are not able even to assemble in a university lecture theatre. I understand this dynamic. I think for each student in this category, the question is personally, it's a very personal question. You know, do I just give up? Do I drop out? For example, do I emigrate to another country and go to another university which is a friendlier place? It's a possibility. It costs money to do this, and it means giving up friends, etc., etc. The alternative, to put it simply, is of course the fight back. It's the dogged commitment to reversing the power relations, to allowing the powerless, the discriminated against, actually to flourish in these institutions, to defend them against bigotry and silence. This is a very old struggle in universities. I've mentioned already Max Weber, but in my lifetime, it is a question, your question, Alex, was posed by those who were against the bomb, the birth of an anti-nuclear movement at the end of the 1950s. It was a question raised by the lovers of Bob Dylan's poetry. It's a question with the rebirth of feminism that many women ask themselves, should I stay in universities or should I just quit? The commitment to gay and queer rights, the commitment to disability rights, the greening of universities. I mean, all of these initiatives from below were confronted with the questions that were confronted with your questions. How to deal with university bureaucracies and corporate media and governments that are hostile, you know, to your identity. I mean, there is a history of these, and I would say that universities where this resistance succeeded through time are much better places. They're much more open and tolerant places. They're places where there is a much deeper commitment to the ideals of which I spoke earlier. This is a painful, slow process that involves personal judgments. The personal is political. This is what each of us, you know, has to confront ourselves with and answer, I would say.
Thank you so much for the answer. I'll ask you the last question, and also ask you for final words before we wrap up the session, especially again in related to the horrendous events that happened just consequently today and yesterday in Freie Universität Berlin and in Humboldt University. So the last question from Jay, I will read it all at once. Perhaps I missed it in your early remarks. It has become apparent that in the modern university, staff, employees, and professors and instructors feel empowered to push one ideology and by the virtue of the academic power structure, suppress any student's opinions or viewpoints which question or challenge that ideological worldview. Students therefore actively self-censor. Even staff and faculty with a different worldview feel a tremendous pressure to self-censor. Can you comment? And he adds, how do we combat that self-censoring and encourage open discussion? I guess this self-censoring is the form of hypocrisy, right? Yeah, that's the end of the question.
Well, Jay, I feel that I already said enough about this. I mean, I resonate deeply with your question. I myself, as a younger student 100 years ago, had to confront exactly the same question. I can tell you of the first moments when I summoned up the courage. I was a timid, ignorant, young student when I summoned up the courage to stand up, in a public meeting and to ask a question which was unpopular, to question an orthodoxy. And I never forgot these moments. It could only happen in a university. It couldn't happen in a church or a business or in a government bureaucracy. So I think, we could have a whole session. Maybe it's the group would like to have another session on the whole problem of self-censorship. Why is it that there are times when it's as if we have some kind of bird on our shoulder that whispers in our ear, don't say anything. No, stay silent. Where does the bird come from? Why is this bird, on our shoulder and we don't even recognize it? Self-censorship is cruelty to ourselves. Self-censorship, of course, allows power relations to be undisturbed. Self-censorship is self-prostitution. Self-censorship is a slow form of slow destruction of the principles for which we stand, or the sense of wonder that we have about the world. So self-censorship is corrosive. It is part of the problem. What is the alternative? Well, I mentioned parrhesia. Look it up. Michel Foucault gave some lectures in California on that very notion of standing up in public and risking everything, having the guts to say no, or having the guts to tell someone that they are full of nonsense or full of double standards, or that they are defending an orthodoxy that has killing effects, murderous effects. It's simple to say. It's very hard to do. It poses the question: you either give in and therefore soil your sense of responsibility, your commitment to ethics, your commitment to the wonder of the world, your commitment to useless knowledge, to use a phrase. Or you stand up for it. And this takes guts. Only you can do it. Nobody else can do it for you. This, I think, is a very elementary principle that I learned the hard way in my life, and often, censored myself and felt ashamed that I did that. Well, in this particular case, for personal and political reasons, for better or worse, I have decided to cause trouble by not censoring myself and to be willing to speak openly and frankly about a dynamic that I'm not happy about.
Well, I really feel that was. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, it's it's Frühstückzeit here. It's breakfast
Yeah.
time for me.
Yeah.
And,
Also,
uh,
it has been great, really, really great pleasure. I would
my
even maybe take you on the idea that we talk more in the future. I do want to first and foremost thank you so much for joining today. It has been great pleasure, and thanks so much for everyone who stayed with us and who's going to watch this later after we put it up on YouTube. And a great thank you to the amazing students who tried to today to keep a spot to watch this from campus, but it didn't work out. But it feels like it did. What matters is that we tried. And I feel, although I don't have your expertise, but I feel one take from today's yeah. So shout out to all these friends out there. Um, is from what you always said is that it's a spectrum of things that we could do, um, and then it's going to be like a cocktail of options. We need to sometimes mix and take, but always, and like what brought us today is that we try to find allies, and we find an ally in you, and we're happy to be in this position. Um,
and very importantly, keep a sense of humor when you're making this cocktail of options. You know, making jokes about the powerful, making jokes about fools, is a really important quality. I think it was George Orwell who said every joke is a little revolution. I mean, it remains true. My next project, by the way, is I'm planning to write a history of fools, because there are so many of them in our times, and we lack a good history of folly and fools. But
yes.
ja, herzlichen Dank zusammen. Shukran, everybody, and Hunada for convening and sharing this meeting. It was a great personal pleasure for me.
The pleasure is ours. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording first.